Get started this morning. Welcome. Thank you for joining us for VC Ag Today this Thursday morning, October the 8th, 2020. I hope everyone is doing well, and we're glad you'll be able to join us this morning. We're pleased to be joined this morning by Mr. David Kindig with the Department of Conservation and Recreation. David is the head of the Agricultural Nutrient Management section there, and he coordinates all of those trainings within that department. So we're pleased to be joined by David. And the topic of discussion this morning is nutrient management plans and the changes that you need to know about. One of the focuses that we've asked David to speak on is some of the proposed and upcoming legislation for the year 2025 and how that may impact agricultural producers and folks that are utilizing nutrient management plans and those that may need nutrient management plans if that occurs. So without further ado, I'll let David speak more to that, but just a few general housekeeping notes that I'd like to add. If you're on the call with us this morning, we ask that you please mute yourself to avoid any background noise. And we'll open it up for questions and comments at the end of the presentation after David has shared his comments and presentation with us. If you have questions throughout the presentation, if you could please just add those in the chat window. We'll be glad to address those as they come along. Also, the presentation is going to be recorded this morning, so please help to distribute this to producers, anyone within the industry that you think may benefit from this recording. So without further ado, David, we appreciate you joining us this morning, and thank you for being here to provide these updates.
Oh yeah, Robbie, I appreciate the invitation. So I hit my, so you guys are going to have to coach me a little bit because this old dog learning new tricks. So I'm going to hit share screen now.
Yes, sir, David. If you hit share screen, it should pop up a window there, and then it'll show an option for your desktop, and you can share that.
Okay, let's see here. All right. Okay, so this might actually work. Okay, so as Robbie said, probably most people know me, but my name is Dave Kindig. I'm the training and certification coordinator for the Nutrient Management Program in Virginia. I conduct the ag training schools, continuing education meetings, and develop, administer, and analyze the nutrient management exam. I'm technical support to certified nutrient management planners, covering plan implementation or program implementation, and agronomic aspects of crop production recommendations associated with nutrient management plan development. So some of the things I'm going to talk about today, the bill that has 2025 set as a date where plans may become mandatory, and then we'll go and talk a little bit about regulations and the nutrient management program itself, writing plans, talk about verification a little bit and the importance of that. And we have a new program in place that we can actually pay planners directly from our central office. And I'll share with that a little bit how that can be used to help farmers get their plans written. So House Bill 1422. This is language that as of December 31st, 2025, if we haven't meet our reduction goals, the option is nutrient management plan will become mandatory. So I'm just going to go down through this a little bit instead of kind of summarize it. I pulled this off the website, and some of the formatting is a little funky, but I think we'll be able to make it work. So December 31st is when the decision has to be made. And we're going down through here. The one question is, does it addresses cropland located in the Chesapeake Bay watershed. where fertilizer, manure, sewage sludge, and other compound containing nitrogen or phosphorus are applied. Chesapeake Bay cropland does not include land on which bovines are pastured. So you got to watch out for those bovines crossing the road. Okay, so that kind of addresses that at the moment. Let me, okay, that's not going to work. All right. Any operator of 50 or more acres Chesapeake Bay cropland shall maintain and implement an approved nutrient management plan. If this comes to law, that's what they're looking at. So less than 50 acres, at the moment, this language looks like they would be exempt from that. One thing you may be interested in, any information collected by the department is not FOIAble. So I know that's always a concern with farmers whenever anything comes in place. So are people going to be able to get my information through this legislation? So they do have that addressed in here. So the information is not FOIAble. Okay. So the other side of the legislation is addressing stream fencing. So here the language says any person who owns property in the Bay watershed which has 20 or more bovines and are pastured shall install and maintain stream exclusion practices sufficient to keep all those bovines from any perennial stream in the watershed. And so they're looking at two things. They're looking at making nutrient management mandatory and getting mandatory stream fencing done. Now, this is my selling point to get nutrient management on the ground. So the provisions in this chapter, as created by the Act, shall not become effective unless or on July 1st, 2026, Secretary of Agriculture and Forestry and Secretary of Natural Resources jointly determine that the Commonwealth's commitments to the Chesapeake Bay program have not been satisfied by either coverage of sufficient portion of the Bay cropland by nutrient management plans, installation of sufficient number of livestock stream exclusion practices, or a combination of other agricultural best management conservation practices. So we have opportunity, in my mind, to take care of this legislation real easily by making sure we meet our goals, because the language states shall not become effective. So if we meet our goals, this legislation kind of goes away. So there's some moving targets here, and that is we have these two secretariats getting together and they are making that decision. Okay, so so it's real important we start getting good documentation of our progress just as soon as possible, so that as we move forward to 2025, we have a history of documentation that we have not only met our goals, but we are maintaining them. And we have to, if we're going to come to the table and talk to the secretaries that are making this decision, in my opinion, we have to have a good, solid case so that they can be very comfortable in their decision. Okay. So let's see what's on down here. I think that's the legislation that's in place. And so how are we going to deal with this, whatever the outcome is? And I think the other thing that needs to be considered is, more than likely by July 2026, the people that wrote this legislation will probably not be here. We may not be dealing with different secretaries in natural resources and ag and forestry. So they may view this legislation a little bit differently. Between now and 2025, there's a possibility they could look at the language in this regulation and make some adjustments to it. So there's several moving targets here, and how are we going to advise farmers to position themselves so what comes in 2026 with this decision is going to have a minimal amount of impact on their operation. Okay, so that's my take on how we're going to deal with this. To sit back and say, I'm not going to do anything till I have to, and I know there's some thought out there that that's what's going to be done. There's some repercussions to that. On the plan writing side, you might say, well, you know, I can get a plan. 2025, if they say you need a plan, I can go get a plan. Well, first, you haven't contributed to a positive decision by not getting your farm a nutrient management plan for your farm. Second, if it becomes mandatory, then you have to realize that not only your farm needs a plan, but there's going to be a lot of other farms that need plans if they've decided not to get one either. So you may find that there's not an overabundance of plan writers to take on this extra load. So you might get delayed in getting a plan written. Probably more importantly is you have to understand what goes into a nutrient management plan. I'm advocating starting if you don't have a plan now, get a plan. There's a lot of options to writing nutrient management plans, and we'll cover that when we jump into the regs. But very important to have yield history and application records. With yield history and application records, that gives the planner some other options to be writing the contents of the plan. Without a history of application and yield records, the planner is going to be limited to using the values process to write nutrient management plans. And in some cases, farmers that are better managers probably doing better on yields than values is going to assign to the fields. So that could be an issue. Let's see what else we have here. So I think that's the main parts about this legislation. I don't have a crystal ball that tells me what the outcome of this might be. I think we still have a lot of options on the table. Like I say, the people that are going to be making this decision in 2025 and July 2026 probably aren't going to be the same people that have written this. So we don't know, you know, what that thinking might be at that time. So if the farmers have plans, no matter what the decision is, if it does become mandatory and a farmer has a plan in place, he has good yield records, he has good application records, it's probably going to have little effect on his operation. For the farmers that have waited to the last minute, they're going to be limited in their options for getting the content of the plan written closely to what they're already doing. So, let me jump into looking at a plan. This language is what it is. I would say I would take it seriously. And I would approach anybody I'm explaining to this that let's just assume after July 1, 2026, there's going to be action taken that's going to put these requirements as mandatory. And so if you prepare for that, we meet our goals, you know, your farmers have been positioned to to deal with it much better. So let me go to, let's start talking about the nutrient management plan. I'm sure most of you are familiar with nutrient management plans and the language that goes into writing a plan. A Virginia nutrient management plan is a recognized tool that efficiently manages nutrients for crop production. So it's a good tool for the farmer to have in his toolbox. It sets a standard. And as we go through the next few years, as I keep mentioning, there's a lot of flexibility that the planner has if the farmer has yield records and application records to write the plan. So the other thing, and we're talking about credibility of having a nutrient management plan, it's a recognized tool for efficient management of nutrients, and they are written by certified planners. And so the certification process is just not a rubber stamp method. Planners have to meet education and experience requirements, and they have to pass both parts of the nutrient management exam. So again, that adds credibility to the program, because we do have qualified people doing the work. And let me take this over here. Okay. So we have this defined in our regs, the education and experience requirement, and passing both parts of the exam. So every planner that is Virginia certified has met these qualifications, and that's how they earn their certification. Another thing, once they are certified, every 2 years certification is renewed, and in that 2-year period they're required to either write plans and accumulate continuing education credits, or if they do not write plans, they have to accumulate more credits. So once they're certified, they're not just get their certificate and that's the end of it. They're required, as many other certification programs are for agronomists, to participate in continuing education credit. So the other thing I want to point out as we're in the regs is the purpose. Okay, and so sometimes people just say, oh, I got to get a plan, but there's a lot of depth involved in our program. And one of the things is we had to identify the purpose for nutrient management and nutrient management planning. And I think this is something that people overlook, and they just throw it in the category, oh, this is just to save the bay. This is just to save the bay, you know, this one. And they kind of poo-poo it off a little bit. But as you see here in the purpose, and we take this seriously, I point this out to planners when we go through our training. Nutrient management plan is prepared to indicate how primary nutrients are to be managed on farm fields and other land for crop production. Okay, so you see that that's underlined. We're writing a nutrient management plan for crop production. If you follow the procedures in writing a plan, we will get the environmental benefits. So I want people to understand the emphasis should be put on crop production and then continue, and in ways to protect groundwater and surface water from excessive nutrient enrichment. Okay, so we have all that lined out in our regs, and we're going to touch on a few things so you get an idea about the flexibility that comes with having good records. Plans contain operating procedures based on expected crop yield, existing nutrient levels in the soil, organic residuals, optimum timing and placement of nutrients, environmental resource protection, and agronomic practices such as liming, tillage, and crop production. So a plan addresses things very thoroughly, and that's what gives it its credibility. So let me bring up another illustration here. So we run into two things that are maybe myths or reasons people don't think they want a plan or need a plan. And I found this illustration, yield equals the sum of all the variables. And so two of the things I always hear about for people that want to poo-poo nutrient management is that you won't let me put enough nitrogen on my corn, or you won't let me go for the yield that I think I can get. Okay, so we'll address that. I'll show you what in the regs, but I just want to put everything in perspective. So the farmers over here, and they're really worried about nitrogen, maybe phosphorus. You know, we're not letting them put enough phosphorus down. But when you look at all of the factors here that go into yield, okay, so is the farmer stepping back and looking at all these other factors, okay? Or is he just looking at these two little factors right here? So I just want to emphasize all of these factors go into getting a good yield. And I think sometimes we get too much focused on one or two factors and we start overlooking a lot of other factors. One of my pet peeves is the seed. And I'm sure you all experience it too. I have farmers that say, well, you know, I'm not going to decide how much corn I'm going to plant till April and I see what corn prices are doing. Well, guess what? By April, the varieties left in the warehouse are probably not as high yielding varieties as was in the warehouse last November. That makes sense? And so the farmer may be putting himself at a disadvantage by not considering some of the seed factors back in November. I understand there's all kind of issues having to pay forward and everything like that. And that's fine. That's fine. We have to realize all farmers are working at different management levels for different reasons. Okay, but I'm just saying, if they're losing yield because they're not able to attain the top yielding varieties, you're not going to make that up by dumping more nitrogen out there. Okay, so just to emphasize, there's a lot going in to getting high yield crops, as you all well know. And I think if you've experienced visiting at meetings where they bring in farmers that are getting these extremely high yields, when you listen to those talks, everybody's looking for that silver bullet. What's that one thing they're doing that they're getting the high yields that I can do? And I think if you listen to their whole presentation, you're going to find they're looking at all these factors and addressing every single one they can address to get that high yield. Okay, so I'm going to get off the soapbox now. All right, let me see, where are we going now? Okay, so in our regulations, let me show you a couple things that might help people better understand why they need to work on getting good crop records and things like that. So in our regs, we're looking at the section that says expected crop yield shall be determined from any one of the following methods on a given field. So when planners are writing nutrient management plans, these are the three criteria they have to use to come up with yield. Yield is the beginning point of writing the plan, because once we know the yield, then we look at soil tests and the crop, and we start determining nutrient needs. So let's go down here to number 3 first, okay? This is the preferred method of beginning to write a plan. And it states variable past crop yields are utilized to determine the expected crop yield. Okay, so if we have good crop yield records, we can use that to determine the crop yield for the plan. Now, this is the important part. The calculation of the expected crop yield shall be an average of the 3 highest yielding years taken from the last 5 years a particular crop was grown in that specific field. So you see right here, this is why for farmers that have not had plans or have not been keeping good yield records, this is why it's very important to start getting that data as soon as possible. Okay, and let me show you a quick illustration here of how it works. Okay, so in my training school, we go through an exercise, and I use this to demonstrate using values, Virginia Agronomic Land Use System, to come up with yield versus farmer records. Okay, so we're going to look at the farmer records part here just to give an illustration of how this works. So these are actual yields. I got one of my specialists. I said, hey, give me some corn yields on a field that you've written plans on for quite a while. So these are actual yields, and you can see you have 91, 161, 128, 110, and 180. Quite a bit of variability. You might say, that looks like that might be from the coastal plain, and you might be exactly right. So if you took the average comes out to 114 bushels. If you use the best 3 out of 5, the average comes to 133. So you can see the difference between just using the average and using the best 3 out of 5. That's 3 out of 5 years. The farmer already gets an advantage in planning his yield because we've dropped the 2 lowest yields out of that calculation. Okay, so best 3 out of 5, this is how that works to keep the farmer ahead of his plan. I mean, as far as planning to improve his yields. So yeah, we have this 161 in here. Is that probably a reasonable number to write a plan or close to it? Well, looking at all the other yields, probably not. Oh, sure, everybody likes to fertilize for 161, but it looks like 110, 120, or 128 and 110 are going to be the years that are going to be most representative of the potential yield. Okay, so in this example, so we don't have these yield records. So in this example, when we use values, what you do is you identify the soil in the field, and we look up that soil productivity, and that's what the farmer has to use. So in this case, I picked a Gilpin soil. It happened to come out to 130. So, right now the example looks like, well, Dave, there's really not much difference. And this is just for a training exercise. When you're writing the actual plan, by far, we want to use yield records. If they don't have the 3 out of 5 and they don't have good yield records, then the planner has to look at the soil productivity group, expected crop yields, consistent with the information in the standards and criteria book. And so the Virginia Tech professors years ago, when we were building our nutrient management program, went through and grouped all the soils by soil productivity group based on actual yields. And so values, for the most part, is still very applicable. Wade Thomason checks values regularly, and for the most part, values works well. For the farmers that are doing better management job, they need to do crop yields. And so, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to keep moving here. Okay, so that's one of the issues. To have good crop yields allows the planner to get a more realistic yield when they're writing nutrient management plans. So now let's look at something else. So maybe you're dealing with soils that are light texture or have some other issues. And so we deal with that in environmentally sensitive sites. And so when the planner looks at all the soils in the field, some of those soils are going to be deemed environmentally sensitive. And they're deemed environmentally sensitive if the area contains or is close to a sinkhole, okay? Soils with high potential leaching, soils less than 41 inches deep. If there's tile drains, soils with high potential for subsurface lateral flow. Most of those soils are over on the eastern shore where you have sandy profiles. Soils identified prone to flooding, and lands with slopes greater than 15%. Okay, so why are we looking at this? Again, to defend using nutrient management procedures to write plans, some untrained people may look at this and these soils are terrible. You shouldn't even be farming these soils. You know, close 41 inches close to bedrock, soils with high leaching potential. You know, just as soon as you put your nitrogen on those soils, it's going to go right through the profile and you're going to be contaminating groundwater. So, and that's true. That's what these characteristics represent. Okay, so we've identified it as environmentally sensitive. So that's one part. The other part is how are we going to deal with that? Okay, and so just happen to have that in the regs. As soon as let's see, right here. Oh no. So I color coded all this so I could go right to it, and you know, best place plans tend to go awry sometimes. Yields. Okay, environmentally sensitive. Oh, 13. Okay. Here we go. Green. Okay, so we've identified we have environmentally sensitive sites. We know the potential for nitrogen loss is high. So what are we going to do? Nutrient planners shall recommend split application of inorganic nitrogen fertilizers as starter, broadcast, or side dressing or top dressing, row crops and small grains consistent with procedures and standards and criteria. Okay, so that's not so bad. Probably most farmers are already making split applications. So we have identified, we have environmentally sensitive sites, and this is how the planner can identify it, okay? So sometimes there's issues and concerns about things like that. If you understand the regs, and the planner should thoroughly understand that, when we encounter environmentally sensitive sites, this is the acceptable way to deal with it. So as if you're challenged on farming fields like that, you can say, hey, I have a nutrient management plan, and my plan addresses dealing with those issues. So the other thing we have that's maybe a little bit unique to Virginia is we have a section in our regs on timing. So when we're dealing with timing, we're dealing with nitrogen management at this point. To reduce the potential for nutrient leaching or runoff, certified planners shall recommend the application of nitrogen materials to only sites where there's an actively growing crop in place at the time of application, or where a timely planted crop will be established within 30 days of the planned nutrient application. Okay, so that's usually address fall planted crops. So you can put the nitrogen on before you plant your crop and it's going to come up. Okay, so we're dealing with nitrogen loss here, and this is pretty easy to understand. We're going to put the nitrogen on as close to the time as needed, which is what side dress does, or we're going to apply it to a crop that's already growing, so the potential for loss is going to be minimized because it's going to be taken up by the plants pretty quickly. Okay, so boy, it's almost 9:30. I want to talk just a teeny bit about the science here so that farmers and you all maybe just don't think about this. Side dressing corn. Okay, so our environmentally sensitive sites for side dressing corn, let's say we have a high yield potential up above 130, 140, 50, 60 bushels maybe. So we're looking to put in a lot of nitrogen down. So we're going to put that nitrogen down. And you notice we haven't talked about reducing the nitrogen application rates because we're on soils that have a high leaching potential. Very important for a nutrient management plan to be applied to those fields because we're splitting the nitrogen and we're managing it to minimize that loss. The other thing that's going on, we go to the hydrologic cycle, which is just the rainfall events over a year's time. We're putting our highest rate of nitrogen on late spring, early summer. And so let's think about what's going on during that period of time. We have high evaporation because it's hot. We get a rainfall. We have a high potential for that rainfall to evaporate. And we have growing plants. And so we have high transpiration rate. So why is that important? When you look at the water and how it's being affected by that time of year, as we get rainfall events and we have this high rate of nitrogen applied to the soils, the possibility of water movement down through the soil profile is low. And so between the evaporation and the plants taking up water, it's pretty much sucking all the water up that's coming down that time of year. Very unlikely we're going to have saturated soils. And so again, following nutrient management recommendations, the potential for nitrogen loss to groundwater at that time is very low. So we're in a good position to manage nitrogen. So we go later into the season and let's just say we had a poor yield because of drought or whatever. Okay, so we have that nitrogen still in the soil. We haven't had a lot of opportunity for potential loss yet. And so now the next way to address minimizing that loss, and I know everybody's thinking it, well, they were going to plant cover crops. Absolutely right. And so as you look at managing nitrogen, there's a lot of flexibility in the plan, a lot of options. And so when you have a plan, you can defend how you're managing your nitrogen when you're following the nutrient management plan pretty rigorously. Okay, so we covered that. All right, phosphorus. So we're managing phosphorus differently than nitrogen because nitrogen has the potential to leach through the soil pretty easily. Phosphorus, as you all know, is held by the soil and held in place. So when we're looking at our regs, we're looking at how we're going to manage phosphorus. Okay, phosphorus application rates shall be managed to minimize adverse water quality impacts consistent with the subdivisions. And so we're going to look at that right now. Okay, phosphorus applications from inorganic nutrient sources. And inorganic nutrient sources are just a regulatory way of saying fertilizer for the most part. Shall not exceed crop nutrient needs over the crop rotation based on a soil test. So we're going to take a soil test and we're going to apply phosphorus based on that soil test. Okay, that's pretty simple. No challenge there, but we know the planner is going to write proper recommendations for phosphorus. So that's fine if you're putting fertilizer down and you have a phosphorus recommendation. If you have a 0 phosphorus recommendation, you just write a 0 grade fertilizer to go down. That works fine until you start applying manures. Manures have phosphorus in them, can't extract it out. So we need a way for the planner to deal with high phosphorus testing soils that still need to accept manure from the animal operation they're writing the plan for. Okay, so we have that in the regs. And this section right here, whenever possible, phosphorus applications from organic nutrient sources should not exceed crop nutrient needs over the soil test over the duration of the crop rotation. Okay, so that gives us a little flexibility. As you see here, it should not exceed crop nutrient needs based on a soil test over the duration of the rotation. So you can actually over apply nitrogen to one crop as long as it doesn't exceed the nutrient needs of all the crops in the rotation. Again, it allows for easy management of the manure and making use of the nitrogen contained in the manure. Okay, so if we can do that with a soil test, that's fine. If we're at zero phosphorus need by our soil test, we need another option. Okay, so if that's not possible, phosphorus application rates and control practices contained in the plan are consistent with phosphorus management provisions contained in the standards and criteria. And so those provisions are our environmental threshold approach and the P index. So when we are making applications of phosphorus, if we're using a soil test, the application rate goes to 0 at 20% phosphorus saturation of the soil. So why is that important? As the phosphorus saturation of the soil increases, we have found that the potential for the phosphorus to come back into solution and be lost increases. Okay, that just makes sense. If you have iced tea and you like sweet iced tea, some people might put 1 scoop in it, and that's okay. If you really like sweet iced tea, you might put lots of scoops in it. So you've probably way over applied your sugar in your iced tea. That's why you like it. So in the case of phosphorus, we have to be able to offer planters an option when they're working with animal operations to sensibly be able to apply that manure, even though it's not contributing to crop yield. So the environmental threshold allows that to be done. The environmental threshold is a simple practice. We only look at soil test and the physiographic region where the farm is located. The phosphorus environmental threshold approach allows applications to go up to 30% phosphorus saturation. And in most cases, on most operations, that's adequate to take care of the manure application and manage it. Then if we have extremely high testing soils with other factors that may contribute to phosphorus loss, we can use the phosphorus index. The phosphorus index cuts off at an upper limit of 65% phosphorus saturation in the soil. So a huge jump from soil test and from environmental threshold. But we can justify going to that higher rate because we look at 13 different factors to calculate the outcome of the phosphorus index. We take into account all sources of phosphorus and take into account all methods of transportation from the site. And so at 65% saturation, we go to 0 phosphorus. That's extremely high, very seldom cannot apply to fields because of the high soil test. But that upper limit, again, assures we're managing the nutrients properly. Okay, so so let me make another point here. You may have farmers that say, well, I'm already doing all that. I'm following my soil tests. I'm not over applying nitrogen. I don't have any problems allocating my manure to fields. Why do I need a nutrient management plan? And this comes back to being able to document this practice is being put in place. So inspection to acknowledge implementation, I've deemed this for this section. The districts go out and they inspect practices that they pay cost share for. So we have 2 processes. We have a visual verification and a non-visual verification. So visual verifications are very obvious. You go out and they're inspecting for cover crop practice. You can see the cover crop growing in the field, and they have specifications that it has to meet so they can pay for it. So that's very obvious. They go out and you look at a stream crossing, you look at a grass waterway installed. Visually, you can see, yes, this is done and it's meeting practice specs. You go out for nutrient management. there's no visual way you can say, yes, the plan's being implemented. So that's a non-visual BMP. For non-visual BMPs, we depend on the documentation of having a nutrient management plan and having that plan followed. So that's why first, it's very important to have a nutrient management plan. And second, it's very important to follow it because you can base what you've done on records, the history of records. So we're running real close to time here. So let me touch on a few other things here that are very important. Of course, everybody knows about the Bay model, and most get a bad taste in their mouth when you start talking about the Bay model. We have gone to phase 6, which is the latest version of the Bay model. And in phase 6, we have gained a lot of favor in the Bay model as far as agriculture goes. Building the phase 6 model, they had a series of special committees that reviewed all of the BMPs in the model. From all those reviews, agriculture had every single one of their BMPs increased in the amount of reduction we get for installing those BMPs on the land. Everything from cover crops and all the cost share practices through nutrient management. So it's positioned agriculture to be able to meet their goals very well. And I can't emphasize that enough. But to meet those goals, we need plans. We need planned acres, and we need verification done of those acres. And so there might be some hesitancy of farmers to participate in verification, and I want them to understand that's not the case at all. The planners that write the plan are the people that do the verification, and we have a form. They have to have a form for everything. Planners come out and they interview the farmers, and for crop production, they only do first 9 questions on the form. Okay. And it's questions like, have you calibrated your equipment? Did you follow the application rates for nitrogen? Real simple questions. Okay, so the farmer shouldn't be intimidated about participating in the verification. Planners usually do this at the end of the growing season when they come back to review what's been done and what the farmer's planning to do for the next growing season. And so it's just a part of the planner visit at the end of the growing season, getting the rotations for the next year. They spend some time going through and getting this. So they look at the field. So maybe, they didn't hit some of them real good, okay? Maybe they switched to crops and never contacted the planner. So you have yes acres. Those are the acres that they followed the plan on. You have no acres, pretty obvious. They switched something up. They got the wrong rate of manure down. And then they have justifiable deviation, which is kind of a gray area where they may have switched to crop, but they were able to use the same application rate. So we have a little flexibility there to get a few more acres up in the yes column. Okay, so this is very important. Planner can do it. We have what we call third party. And so for the planner to be able to do the verification, third-party verification allows the planner to do that. So every once in a while, another person, one of our staff, will go out with the planners as they're doing verification, and they just sit there and observe. And they deem that the planner has done an acceptable job of recording of the farmer's responses. That's all it is to it, pretty simple. The most important thing about verification is that we can answer the question, how do you know the farmer is following the plan? we had a lot of flexibility in that we built our own verification program and the questionnaire. It was reviewed by EPA and accepted. And so now we have a methodology in place approved by EPA that says you're following your plan. We have a tool in place that say we can answer that question. Yes, the farmer's following this plan. So what if they're not? What if they only have, I was out visiting with a planner and he did a verification and the farmer only had 65% verification. We're running between 85 up to 90%. Farmers following their plans, have that documented. Well, that's awful. What are we going to do? The farmer's only at 65%. What's that mean? Really, no, there's no penalty. There's nothing coming back on the farmer. They discovered what the problem was. They had miscalibrated the applicator and they overapplied phosphorus on a lot of fields. And so this looks bad. Well, next year, so they found the problem, they corrected the problem. This coming year, the farmer's probably going to be up at 85 or 90% implementation of his plan. Okay, no issues, no penalties for the 65%. But what you have to recognize is that's a tremendous testimony of how this process works. And once again, when we're looking at defending what we're doing, and we can show how we've progressed and gone from a low rate to a high rate just by identifying the issues and having a farmer address them, it's a great testimony to say that what we're doing is working. Okay, so I got a couple minutes yet. Let me touch on one other thing, and that's a direct pay program. And I can make this information available to the agents. They can just contact me and I'll be glad to give it to them. So direct pay is very similar to the NM1A program that's administered through the cost share program. The difference between NM1A and direct pay is that the farmer is not involved in the direct pay program. The planner takes care of all the paperwork. And so the planner finds a client, or if he's already working with a client, that's fine. They submit a consent form that the farmer has signed to us. We administer this program out of central office in Richmond. We receive that consent form. We approve the plan to be written because we have the money. Planner writes the plan, sends the plan to us. We review it and approve it, and the planner gets paid. And so it's a very simple process. As far as a farmer goes, they just see the planner showing up and writing their plan. They're not obligated to do any kind of legwork. It's not run through the district. So some advantages: one, now since the planner is getting paid through direct pay, it allows the district and the farmer to take more of the funds and apply that to putting BMPs on the ground. So they're not having to take money out of the farmer's account to pay for the plan writing. So it allows extra money there to put BMPs on the ground. So I put this document together and I can make it available to any farmer. I put in here a list of questions. So we have the list of pay direct certified planners, and I have about 32 in the program so far. The areas they serve, whether they write crop or they write animal plans. So if you already have and you're working with a planner and you're very satisfied with the service that planner is giving, they just can sign up and work through the direct pay, no problem at all. So if you're looking for a planner and you're a little hesitant, well, what can I do? How do I know if I'm getting the right planner or not? So I've put a list of suggested questions in this document about, so you call a planner up, they work in the area where your farm is. You might ask them some of these questions to decide, hey, is this the right person to come work for me? Because, you know, all planners are different. They have different personalities. They have slightly different philosophies. And so if you're going to be serviced well by a planner, you and that planner have to be communicating on the same level, okay? And so that's very important to get the most out of Nutrient Manager program. You have to have an excellent relationship with your planner. And so some of these questions might help you sort through them. Like I say, if you're already working with a planner and they're giving you good service, they can switch over and get paid through the direct pay program. It's seamless from the farmer perspective. Several of the districts are promoting the planner to use direct pay, again, because then that allows them to allocate more of the funds to the farmer to put practices on the ground. And Robbie, I think I'll quit there. I can talk about some more things, but people might be getting itchy for sitting for an hour listening to me. So I'll go and stop share and turn it back. If there's any questions, or if you want me to address anything before you close the meeting, I'll be glad to do it.
All right, thank you, Dave. We appreciate you joining us this morning and sharing that update. I was just looking, we've got a lot of dialogue, several questions in the chat window, so I'm going to scroll back up and see if we can maybe touch on some of those topics. I see we have one of the first comments, and first of all, I'd like to thank all of you from the local soil and water districts that have joined us. I appreciate you being here and providing some of these questions and comments. I think that's really going to be helpful for a good dialogue discussion this morning. So one of the questions and comments that we had, Dave, was, talking about some of these cost share practices, maybe not being available if this does become implemented into legislation in 2025 and 2026. So, I don't know that there's much further to be said about that other than that is a possibility.
Well, yeah, if it becomes mandatory, and this is all conjecture. I mean, typically when things become mandatory, we haven't always offered cost share for it because now the farmer is required to do it. So from the cost share side, especially the stream fencing, they've had very good programs where the farmer can get pretty much everything paid for. And so the discussion might come up, well, now that it's mandatory, and if budgets are getting tight, they might say, you know what, they have to do it now anyway, now they're going to have to pay for it. So I think there'd be a lot of pushback to that, but they may look at some practices, maybe let them in place, but they may reduce the payment. So from the district standpoint, as many producers as you can get participating, especially in stream fencing, it's going to certainly be a benefit come 2025 when the secretaries are have to making those decisions.
I think you touched on this a little bit, Dave, but we did have a question here about the Bay model credits, and the question was, are credits to the goal based on the number of nutrient management plans or the acres that are in nutrient management plans?
Okay, that's a very good question. The goal is based on acres. So we have to show, right now we're looking at having acres in the Bay drainage, about 876,000 acres of planned acres we need in the drainage system. So that sounds like a pretty big number, and it is. But what I'm trying to let people know is we've had that goal in years past. I mean, we've had that acre numbers in years past. So let me look at my numbers here real quick. In 2012, we had 1,200,000 acres planned. In 2013, we had 1,450,000 acres planned. In 2014, we had 1,343,000 acres planned. So having to plan 876,000 acres is a very doable goal. Now, the difference between those past years and where we're at now is that we have to do verification. So if we're at, let's say we're at 80% verified acres as far as our verification program. So that's acres going to count. So let's say if we submitted 1 million acres, plans, we would only be able to count 80% of those, or 800,000. So when we're looking at 876,000 acres, yes, we're going to have probably close to 1 million acres planned to get that 876,000. But it's very doable. We're running at 85 to 90% verification, which has astounded everybody. But I think it really shows the commitment of Virginia agriculture to do the right thing. And that's what's come out of this verification program. It really has shown agriculture in a very good light.
All right, the next question that we had here was in prescribing nitrogen and phosphorus, would it be a correct understanding that yields under the value system can be used, or the average 3 highest yields of the past 5 years can also be used, whichever one is higher? And I believe that is correct.
Yes, they can use either one. Yeah, but hopefully, if you're keeping good yield records, the farmer is doing a little better than values. But yes, either one can be used. And I have a lot of planners that write the plans based on values. The farmer has looked at his yields over time and say, you know what, values is running right along with what I'm doing. And so I'm going to step on a few toes here. Planners like to use values because they don't have to spend the time getting yield records. Farmers like using values because they don't have to spend time documenting yield records. As we go forward, we need documentation of yields and application, because when we do verification, if you don't have any yield documentation of yield records and application records, we're not going to be able to count those acres toward meeting our goals. So values is fine if you want to use that to write the plans, but we still need participation by the farmer in accumulating the records. And the record keeping system doesn't have to be complicated. Okay, it can be very simple. A lot of financial lending institutions have the record books that they give the farmers to keep track of records. It doesn't have to be computerized, anything like that. They can have their own system. It just has to be some type of documentation that the planner can look at it and see that the farmer made applications according to the plan.
All right, we got a question, David. Will DCR be sending the nutrient management plans to the district, or will that be the responsibility of the plan writer?
Yeah, the thing about sending the plans around, I usually tell the planners when they sign up farmers that if a farmer's participating in cost share, the planner needs to go by the district and talk to whoever administers that as to what the plans need to look like and how they need to be formatted. And so I'll continue to do that. So at that point, I would let that be the decision between the planner and the farmer. As the farmer says, hey, and the district calls for a plan, you have my permission to send that plan to them, or whatever the arrangement needs to be. I urge planners to work directly with their farmers for requests for any information they do. And so if the farmer tells the planner, hey, make me an extra copy and drop it off at the district, that can be done, but it's not automatic. I tell the planner they need to respect their client's data and how it's managed, and they have to work through the farmer to get permission to do that. Most times it's not a problem, so it can be done. I just stress they need to have a little custody chain there, so they're not giving data out that the farmer did not want given out. But yeah, that should be able to be arranged, no problem. But it won't be automatic. They'll, like I say, they'll have to work that out between the planner and the farmer, how the farmer wants his plans distributed.
All right, we've got two more questions in the chat window, David,
Okay.
and then I'll open it up for anyone that has questions or conversation. The first of those is the direct pay program just for the Bay watershed, or is that statewide?
Right now, all the funding that's allocated to it is for the Bay watershed, with one exception. We can write plans outside the Bay watershed that support the litter transport program. So of course, we're trying with the litter transport program, we're trying to move as much litter as possible out of the Bay watershed. And so that was justification enough that we can write plans outside the Bay watershed, but only if they're associated with the litter transport program. All the other writing has to be within the Bay watershed.
And the final question in the chat window, does cropland include nurseries and vegetable farms if they are over 50 acres?
That's a good question. I wouldn't have an answer for that. I think we'd have to go back to the authors of this document to decide that. In my nutrient management regulations, if we look at cropland, crop removal, crop rotation, there's several definitions. Crop means cultivated plants or agricultural produce such as grains, silage, forages, oil seeds, vegetables, fruit, nursery stock, or turf grass. Crop land means land used for the production of grain, oil seeds, silage, industrial crops, and any other category of crop not defined as a specialty crop. So if they would use that definition for croplands, oil seeds, silage, industrial crops, and any other crop not defined as a specialty crop. So let me tell you what specialty crop is. And let's see, specialty crop means vegetables, tree crops, perennial vine crops, ornamental, horticultural crops, and similar crops. So if they use that definition for cropland, vegetable, tree crops, perennial vine crops, ornamentals, and horticultural crops would not come under cropland. But whether that was the intent of the definition of cropland that they used in the reg, I don't know. So that would, let me see if I can, because they have definitions associated with it. Okay, Chesapeake Bay cropland means cropland in the Commonwealth located in the Chesapeake Bay watershed on which fertilizer, manure, sewage sludge, or another compound containing nitrogen or phosphorus is applied. Chesapeake Bay cropland does not include lands on which bovines are pastured. So if you look at that, the only land that's not included as their definition of cropland is pasture where bovines graze. So that would be all inclusive except basically for pastures. So in that case, they may have to look at being included in the mandatory program.
We've got two more questions here, and one I'll address here with our announcement of next week's topic on BC Ag Today. But before we get to that, we've got one question here on would nutrient management plans and streamline exclusion apply to all livestock or just bovines?
Well, I couldn't answer that question. In the language, they only say bovines, and I know that's come up for discussion. What if you have goats or sheep? You know, they're not exactly bovines. So again, that would have to be a clarification we'd have to get from the authors of this document. I'm not trying to push you off, but I don't want to, you know, try to imply something that shouldn't be implied. So at the moment, we could either seek out guides on that or you know, just work as best we can of getting stream fenced out.
All right.
And that could possibly be a change in the language. You know, as we have 5 years here, you have different people coming in. they may look at that and say, well, hey, you know what? We've got hogs and sheep and emus and everything else out here. We really need to make sure that stuff fenced out too. So I would not hang my hat on bovines just meaning cattle, you know, because we have those years to get from one place to 2025. So, you know, the cost share program, how they write to do the stream fencing, I think I'd use that as a guidance as far as how to talk to producers about getting stream fencing done on their operations.
Dave, we had a question. I don't know if you can comment or answer this. We had a question about for the bovine numbers that they mentioned in that regulation. Is that by head or is that by animal unit? Or is that specified?
It's not specified. They just say bovines. I'm thinking, and I may get smacked down for this, since they're using the term bovines, they may not be familiar with the more intricacies of animal units versus head. But it's not specified in the language now. They don't define that by animal units. So I would just assume they're talking about the number of cattle standing there for bovines.
Jim, I also saw your comment there about the question was, is there any hope of getting litter transport to counties that do not have poultry farms on and or within the Bay watershed? And that's a great segue for our next week's presentation. Just to make a point on that while we're at the topic, next week we're going to be joined by Dr. Mark Ryder and Seth Mullins from DCR, and the topic of discussion is going to be poultry litter. We're going to talk a little bit about the agronomics of poultry litter usage, but also we're going to have Seth join us and speak a little bit about some of the updates on the poultry litter program through DCR. So if that's a topic of interest, we encourage you all to join us next week, and that'll be covered. So check in the chat window. I don't see anything additional there. So I'm going to go ahead and just open it up. We've ran a little bit over our usual time slot for VC Ag today, but I think we've got a great discussion going on, and we're really appreciative to have David join us and share this information. So if you're on with us, if you have questions or comments for David, you know, please unmute yourself at this time, and you should have the ability to do that. And if you also have questions, you can additionally add those to the chat window. So I'll open it up for questions or comments.
Yeah, and I'll add, you know, I'm sure everybody's got my contact information. You can go to our website. I'm glad to share any of the documents I brought up here. If anybody has any interest, the direct pay, Robbie, I can probably just email that document to you and you can distribute it to extension agents. If any farmer inquires, they're welcome to give it to them.
Thanks, David. We'd be glad to help distribute those materials. Any other questions, comments for David this morning? You should have the ability, if you just click the unmute button, hopefully we'll be able to hear you. Well,
wouldn't be the first meeting I spoke at, Robbie, where everybody was just so awestruck they couldn't speak.
Well, I think you did a great job covering everything, David, and I know it's you know, that's why we wanted to do this, and I'd like to really give credit to Mike Broadus in Caroline and King George, the agent in those counties. Mike was really the inspiration behind this topic of discussion. He thought this was something that would really be beneficial. So I know, Mike, you're on with us. I thank you for your recommendation for this session. I think we had a great turnout and got a lot of great information. So appreciate you being here with us. Everybody that's joined us from the Soil and Water Districts, other extension personnel and agents, thank you all for being here. As I said, this session has been recorded, so if you have clients that would be benefited from this, please feel free to share that with them. You can see the link there on your screen about 3/4 of the way down for the recorded sessions. Also, if you need help getting that, just contact one of the agents for the program. We'll be glad to get those links to you. Thank you, David. We really appreciate your time this morning. And as always, it's a pleasure to have you all with us. We appreciate the updates. Also, I'd like to take just a brief second again to recognize and thank the group of agents that make this effort possible. As I said, Laura Maxey-Nay, Stephanie Romelchek, Mike Broadus, and Trent Jones wouldn't be possible without all their work. So thank you to everyone. I do see a question here. Taylor Clark, I see you on the chat window. You said you can't unmute. Let me see if I can unmute you, Taylor, if you got a question before we leave. Let's see. You might want to try now, Taylor, and see if that's any difference.
Hey, Robbie, I got it now. Dave, has there been any more discussion about, revising a soil test to give 3 years of recommendations to aid in the speed of the development of a nutrient management plan?
You mean using a soil test older than 3 years?
No, sir.
Oh.
To have a soil test specifically designed to capture some of that information for a nutrient management plan, and rather than the soil test just giving a one year a 1 year crop recommendation, give 3 when it's printed out at Tech.
Oh, okay. Now I know who I'm talking to. I remember we talked about this, Taylor, and I followed up with Rory on it some, but just one person. I just haven't had time to dedicate back to pursuing it more. But I know I understand fully what you're asking, that they could have the. I know one of the issues when I talked to Rory was getting their software updated to do something like that on the down at the soil testing lab.
Well, maybe that would
be. At the moment, we've had a discussion, but we haven't gone any further with it for you, Taylor. And I apologize for not being able to dedicate more time to it, but a lot of stuff's happened here.
Oh yeah, COVID happened. But no, I mean, it would be a wonderful thing for Tech's lab to have a reason to update their software, because that's been an impediment to revising recommendations as things change. I mean,
yeah.
One example of that is, with just the little bit of tobacco samples, we don't use any of the fertilizers that they send back on a recommendation now.
You mean the analysis, Taylor, is outdated?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
But nobody up there remembers Fortran or whatever that program is written in
yeah.
to change it. So I mean, it's way overdue to be changed.
So if they made the recommendations as plant food, that would be better.
Yeah, but for some of those specific crops, I just use that as an example.
Right.
Because it was just the way it was to address the phosphorus and potash that they required by the soil sample. They gave examples of the analysis of the fertilizer.
Yes, sir.
And kind of like a turf sample or something else. They can't go in and change it.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I know they might be able to do something like that internally, because I know they can update.
Oh, nobody knows how to do it.
Oh, okay. I know all that. And the other thing is funding. Even if they did know funding to get somebody to do it's always an issue too. The soil test lab, they really struggle sometimes for funding to keep that going. We really need it, but it's not always their decision whether it's the best thing or not. But thanks for calling, Taylor, and reminded me. I remember we had to talk, and I followed up with Rory on some things, and but I just wasn't able to push it hard enough to get something to address your concern. But I'll bring it back up on the radar now.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for calling.
All right, well, I don't see anything else there, so we'll go ahead and finish up this morning. But again, thank you, David. We appreciate your time this morning. Thank you for all your efforts and being with us. I know this is going to be an ongoing topic of discussion over the next several years, so we'll try to make an effort to continue to do sessions like this and offer some additional information for producers and plan writers to make sure everybody is well ahead of the game, hopefully, depending on what happens in 2025 and 2026. So thank you again for joining us. Again, thank you for all the participants that joined us this morning. A few closing remarks. As I said, next week, our topic of discussion is going to be poultry litter. We're going to be joined by Dr. Mark Ryder and Seth Mullins from the Department of Conservation and Recreation on that topic. So it'll be next Thursday morning at 9 a.m. So be on the lookout for that advertisement. Again, the recordings are posted at the link you see on your screen there. And finally, one last comment I'd like to make. If you've been joining us for these sessions, if you could please fill out our evaluation. You've seen some of that when we send out our emails with the advertisements and stuff, but it just take a few moments of your time. And if you have questions or recommendations for topics, that would be a great way for us to get those and be able to provide a program for those topics. So again, thank you for everyone's time this morning. Hopefully this was a benefit to everyone. And we appreciate, Dave, again, you being with us and hope everyone stays safe and stays well.
Yeah, thank you for the invite, Robbie. I enjoyed it. Hopefully it was helpful.
Yes, sir. We appreciate you being here, and thanks again. We'll contact you if we have further questions or inquiries.
Okay.
Thank you, David.
Yep.